My mother-in-law looked me in the eye at the will reading and said, "There's nothing left for you, dear. You were never really family." I smiled. I said, "That's okay." What she didn't know was that 3 days earlier, my husband's accountant had accidentally sent me an email that wasn't meant for me. An email with a spreadsheet attached, a spreadsheet with my name on it, 14 years of my name on it. By the end of that meeting, I wasn't the woman with nothing. I was the only person in that room who knew where all the money actually was. This is the story of how a family spent 14 years stealing from me in plain sight, and how one forgotten email account brought all of it back. If you've ever been told you don't belong in your own family, stay until the end, because what happened in that lawyer's office is the part everyone in my town still talks about. My name is Claire. I was 31 when I married Daniel. I didn't come from money. Daniel's family did. The Whitfields owned half the commercial property on Main Street, going back 3 generations. When Daniel brought me home the first time, his mother, Pamela, shook my hand like she was checking if it was clean. "She's sweet," Pamela told Daniel later, loud enough for me to hear. Sweet girls are easy to manage. I should have left that night. I didn't. I told myself she just needed time. We married 18 months later. Daniel's father, Richard, ran the family construction business. Daniel worked there too. In line for it, everyone said. I worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm downtown. Numbers were my thing. I was good at them, quietly good. The kind of good nobody notices until they need you. For the first few years, marriage was normal, not perfect. Normal. Daniel was distant, but not cruel. Pamela was cold, but not cruel either. Just cold, the way a room is cold when nobody wants you to get comfortable in it. Then Daniel's father got sick. Richard had a stroke when Daniel and I had been married 4 years. He survived, but he couldn't run the business anymore. And suddenly, everyone needed me, not emotionally, financially. "Claire's good with numbers," Pamela said at a family dinner, like she was offering me up. "She can help us sort out the books while Richard recovers." I said yes. Of course I said yes. He was my father-in-law. I sat at their kitchen table 3 nights a week for 2 months, untangling 15 years of disorganized invoices, missed filings, and informal family loans that were never written down anywhere. What I found should have been a warning. Money moved between accounts with no explanation. Large withdrawals labeled consulting. A property that had been sold, but the money never showed up in the business account. I brought it to Daniel. He said, "Don't worry about it. That's just how Dad's generation did things." I brought it to Pamela. She smiled and said, "You're seeing complicated things very simply, Claire. Leave the business to the family." I was the family. I was married into it. But I understood in that exact sentence that I would never actually be the family. I would just be useful to it. So I kept helping. For years. Quietly, competently. Because I told myself that helping meant I mattered. What I didn't know was that every time I helped, Pam and Richard were learning exactly how much I could be trusted not to ask the wrong questions. Here's what 14 years of marriage actually looked like, once I really added up. I took a lower-paying local job so I could be flexible for family business needs. That was Pamela's phrase, flexible. I helped manage the books for the Whitfield business for free for over a decade. A forensic accountant would later tell me that work alone was worth roughly $200,000 in unpaid labor. When Daniel's salary at the family company quietly increased every year, mine did not. When I asked why I wasn't on payroll for the bookkeeping I was doing, Richard said, "You're not an employee, Claire. You're family. Family doesn't get paid. Family doesn't ask." I want you to notice that sentence. Family doesn't get paid. Family doesn't ask. It sounds loving. It is actually one of the most efficient ways to take from someone for free and make them feel guilty for noticing. We never had children, which Pamela mentioned at almost every holiday, usually paired with a comment about how the company really should stay in blood. I used to think she meant Daniel's blood. I didn't yet understand she meant exactly that, and not mine, in a way that had already been put in writing. Then 14 years in, Richard passed away, and 3 days before the will reading, an assistant at Daniel's family accounting firm sent a routine internal spreadsheet to C. Whitfield, meaning to me, Claire Whitfield, instead of to Daniel's cousin, Carter Whitfield, who handled the firm's books and had the exact same first initial. It was meant for Carter. It landed in my inbox instead. I opened it expecting nothing. I found everything. It was a complete ledger of Whitfield Family Holdings, LLC, an entity I had never once heard mentioned in 14 years of doing their books by hand at the kitchen table. While I was untangling the visible business for free, there had been an invisible one running in parallel the entire time. Rental income from 3 properties I didn't know they owned. A consulting fee paid quarterly to Pamela's sister for work that, based on the dates, she could not possibly have done. She'd been in hospice 2 of those years, and a line repeated every single year since the year Daniel and I got married, labeled simply, CW, Education Trust, CW not me, Carter Whitfield. Daniel's cousin Carter had a daughter Daniel had once mentioned, only once, years ago, as Pamela's favorite grandchild, basically, and laughed it off when I asked what that meant. The trust had been funded every year, the same week as our wedding anniversary. Coincidence? I'm sure. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd done their books for free, and I read 14 years of my own marriage rewritten in someone else's handwriting. I wasn't just excluded from the family money. I had been actively used to manage and hide it, while it was funneled somewhere else to someone else's child the entire time. I didn't cry. I want to be honest with you about that. I felt something colder than crying. I felt clear. I made one phone call that night, not to Daniel, to a forensic accountant named Marissa, who I'd worked with years earlier on an unrelated audit. I sent her the spreadsheet. I asked her one question. Is this enough to prove a pattern? She called back in 4 hours. She said, Claire, this isn't just enough. This is 14 years of documented, dateable, provable financial concealment. Where did you get this? I said, they sent it to me by accident. The will reading was in a law office on the 4th floor, the kind with leather chairs that creak when rich people shift in them. Pamela sat at the head of the table like she still ran the company, even though it was Richard's will being read, not hers. The lawyer read it plainly. The house went to Pamela, as expected. The business, controlling shares, to Daniel, as expected. And then, almost as an afterthought, a line about remaining personal effects and accounts. Meaning me. Meaning Daniel's wife of 14 years got mentioned exactly once in a clause about furniture. Pamela looked at me with something close to pity. There's nothing left for you, dear, she said. You were never really family. That's when I smiled and said, that's okay. I let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. Then I asked the lawyer one question. Before we close this out, is Whitfield Family Holdings, LLC part of this estate, or is it being handled separately? The room didn't move. Pamela's face changed first, then Daniel's. The lawyer looked down at his folder and very carefully said he was not aware of an entity by that name being part of today's proceedings. I placed a single printed page on the table. 14 years of quarterly transfers, one name repeated year after year. CW, Education Trust. I think, I said, we should talk about that entity today, with my accountant on the phone, if that's all right. What happened over the next 6 weeks is the part people in my town still bring up at dinner parties. Marissa, my forensic accountant, built a complete picture from that one spreadsheet. Once you know where to look, the rest follows fast. The Whitfield Family Holdings, LLC, had never been disclosed in any prior estate planning, which is required by law when assets are this significant. That alone opened the door to a formal accounting demand. But the part that actually mattered, the part that protected me, and was something much simpler. For 14 years, I had documented every hour I worked on that company's books. Every late night at that kitchen table. I'd kept it out of habit because I'm an accountant. Habit became evidence. Marissa valued my unpaid labor, conservatively, at just under $210,000. Combined with marital asset law in our state, and the undisclosed LLC being formed during our marriage using funds that should have been part of the marital estate, my lawyer didn't ask for a settlement. He filed for what the money had actually always been, half. Daniel didn't fight it the way Pamela wanted him to. I think some part of him had known for years and simply never said anything because saying something would have meant choosing me over his mother. He didn't choose either, in the end. He just stopped showing up to depositions, and the silence did the choosing for him. Pamela fought. Pamela fought hard, right up until her own sister's hospice records were subpoenaed to explain 4 years of consulting fees paid to a woman who could not lift a pen those years, let alone consult on construction contracts. That's the moment her lawyer asked for a recess he never came back from. I want to tell you the actual ending, not the dramatic one. I didn't take the business. I didn't want it. 14 years at that kitchen table cured me of ever wanting to sit in that family's chairs again. I took the settlement in full, and I took my name back to what it was before I married into theirs. I used some of that money to open my own small accounting firm. I specialize now in something very specific: forensic review for women who suspect their family's books don't add up. I get a new client almost every week who says some version of the same sentence. I think I'm being told a version of this that isn't true. I tell them all the same thing I'm telling you. You are allowed to ask. You are allowed to keep your own records, even when you're told that family doesn't ask. Especially then. Pamela still lives in that house. I heard, through people who still talk to people, that Carter's daughter's education trust is gone now. Not because anyone took it from her, the child did nothing wrong, but because the money it was funded from no longer exists in the way it used to. I don't think about Pamela's face at that will reading as often as you'd think. I think instead about the version of me that sat at that kitchen table for over a decade, believing that being useful was the same thing as being loved. It wasn't. But I'm glad I kept the records anyway. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been the one who did the work while someone else got the credit, or the inheritance, or the trust fund, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe to Love Betrayed for a new true betrayal story every week. And if you know someone who needs to hear that being family should never mean being used, send them this one. I'll see you in the next story.